Like one of those radio alerts for the emergency broadcast system, we are warned in advance. This is only a test. God tested Abraham. 3 words to reassure us, to prepare us for what is to come. But how can we prepare for such a story? Christians call it the sacrifice of Isaac. In Hebrew, it is known as the Akedah, the binding of Isaac. We hear up front that this is only a test, and as Bible stories go, it is by no means the cruelest or the bloodiest. And yet, the Akedah, the sacrifice of Isaac, is one scripture narrative guaranteed to make our blood run cold. For centuries, Jews as well as Christians have been shocked and enthralled by this text. Theologians, artists, and scholars continue to wrestle and defend it, offering a limitless number of interpretations, drawing a wide range of conflicting conclusions. And so, whenever Genesis 22 appears in our lectionary cycle of readings, the preacher cannot do a workaround. The Akedah is simply too central and too troubling a narrative for us to ignore. What to do? I could dismiss this story as a mere human invention or explain it away as a drama depicting the historical shift in ritual sacrifice from human to animal. Both may be true. Neither is much help. Another option is to soften the story's emotional impact. Isaac was never in any real danger. Another is to point out our cultural distance from those primitive days, or to label the sacrifice purely symbolic. And of course, there is the tendency of Christians to view the sacrifice of Isaac through the lens of our gospel by drawing a neat theological line between Isaac and Jesus. Each beloved son obediently carrying the wood that is the instrument of his own sacrifice, or between Jesus and the ram in the thicket, each an innocent victim in a divinely negotiated exchange. No matter the explanation, this story remains offensive and alarming. No interpretation can ease our outrage or calm our racing hearts. Are we really meant to see Abraham's compliance as a model for faithful living? The man who stands up to God and convinces God not to destroy the entire wicked city of Sodom, but then stays silent when it comes to the life of his child? And far more offensive to us is the notion of God in the role of abusive parent, coldly demanding the sacrifice of children, including ultimately his own son on the cross. Each option is worse than the one before. What parent, what person can make sense of what God asks and what Abraham agrees to? One midrash, or rabbinic interpretation, suggests that, in fact, Abraham fails his test, that he should never have said yes. Another imagines a suspenseful shift in the drama as God the tester becomes the tested. Abraham raises his knife and then waits, daring God to let him go through with it. And God is the one who cries, "Uncle." For millennia, we humans have been swept up in this story's emotional and dramatic potential, evidence of both its literary artistry and deep religious significance. But at the end of the day, for me, it is simply unthinkable to have faith in a capricious God who insists on the ritual murder of an innocent, of Abraham's son Isaac, or God's own son Jesus, or any child ever. There's just too much cruelty and horror perpetuated against children in our world to allow that reading of this text to go unanswered. So then what? Well, we know from the Genesis narrative that for some reason, God decides to put all his eggs in one basket marked Abraham, a man whose record is spotty when it comes to personal decision-making, but who nevertheless has consistently trusted God. And this suggests to me that the Akedah is not a vehicle for making generalizations about true faith. God and Abraham are intimately bound in a particular promise, a promise personified in this boy named Isaac. Did you notice that the dialogue we are privy to in this story is relational, even warm? God says, "Take your son, your only son, Isaac, whom you love." Isaac and Abraham call each other father and my son. Strangely, to us, the text contains no discernible anxiety or misgiving. Even Isaac seems to reflect a bizarre state of calm. Is it too much to conclude that Abraham obeys God's terrible command not blindly, because he was ordered to, but not cravenly because he feared for his own life, but for the simple reason that Abraham trusts God absolutely? Such trust between God and the man God calls to be the father of a chosen future nation is exceptional. God will not ask you or me to perform this kind of sacrifice. And yet, truth be told, it is almost certain that at some point the faith of every one of us will be tested, if it hasn't been already. God's promises to us as descendants of Abraham and Isaac do not guarantee protection from the darkness of this world, nor release from our own fear and suffering. The question is, will we turn away from God when we are tested? Or will we trust God to redeem the dark places, to provide a way through? When God first promises to Abraham and Sarah that they will have a son in their old age, Sarah laughs. And God says to Abraham, "Why did she laugh? Is anything too wonderful for the Lord?" Many years later, at another annunciation, the angel Gabriel similarly reassures a doubtful Virgin Mary, saying, "Nothing will be impossible with God." Do you believe that, angel? How do you answer God's question, "Is anything too wonderful for the Lord?" Many of us faithful 21st century Christians want desperately to say, no, nothing is too wonderful for God. But then we remember certain things, terrible things, and wonderful things we desire so desperately that we are almost afraid to hope for them. Things to do with life and death, to do with aging and barrenness, illness and estrangement, nation and identity. Today's scripture leads us to a place of discomfort with God we just as soon avoid. We want to believe, but experience tells us there are things God cannot or will not fix or provide, and so we hedge our bets. We skirt the question, what does it really look like to put my whole trust in God? So, let us remember that every Christian's life in faith begins with that very question. It's spoken for the first time at our baptism. It is the second question posed to candidates, parents, and godparents about Jesus. Do you put your whole trust in his grace and love? And parents cradle their beloved, vulnerable little babies and answer, "I do," hoping never to be put to the test, because they know in their hearts that baptism is no magic charm, no protective bubble. On the contrary, being baptized into Christ's death and resurrection is in fact a spiritual sacrifice meant to resonate with the sacrifice of Isaac. The deeper truth of baptism exposes our greatest hopes and fears, especially a parent's fear of the death of a child. And the promise of baptism is not that nothing bad will happen, but that with God nothing is impossible. That even death can and will lead to new and everlasting life. I wonder sometimes if Bible stories like the Akedah offend and provoke us on purpose so that we take God seriously, so that we stay engaged with the God who created us for love, whose desire is for intimacy with us, who promises to keep coming back for us, no matter what.